I stood before my new house, the mortgage paid entirely from my account, staring at a brand new lock I never installed. My mother cracked the door open. Utterly unapologetic, inside, my sister lounged on my pristine white sofa, shoes on, sipping wine. "Stay at a hotel," my mother ordered softly. "The two kids are sleeping. Do not make a scene." They expected me to crumble under family guilt. They forgot I dissect legal contracts for a living. My name is Piper Evans. I had been anticipating the quiet sanctuary of my Huntersville, North Carolina home for the last 48 hours. When my compliance conference in Atlanta was canceled 2 days early, all I wanted was my own bed, my meticulously organized kitchen, and the profound silence of a house that belonged solely to me. I had purchased this property exactly 4 months ago. It was the culmination of 7 years of aggressive saving, skipped vacations, and ruthless budgeting. It was my name on the mortgage, my money securing the down payment, and my signature on every single closing document. I dragged my rolling suitcase up the porch steps, the wheels thumping a familiar rhythm against the wood, and reached out to punch my access code into the front door keypad. My fingers hit empty air where the sleek black module should have been. I blinked, the exhaustion of travel momentarily clouding my vision. The smart lock keypad was gone. In its place was a shiny, generic brass deadbolt. A deadbolt I had not purchased, a deadbolt I had not authorized, a deadbolt I certainly did not have the key for, before the surge of sheer panic could fully materialize into a desperate call to the local police department. The heavy oak door creaked open. It did not swing wide to welcome the homeowner. It opened a mere 4 inches, restricted by a thick brass chain lock that was also entirely alien to my entryway walls. Framed in that narrow vertical slice of my own house was my mother, Janice. She did not look startled to see me standing on my own porch. Her hand rested firmly against the edge of the door, her posture resolute, acting as the ultimate gatekeeper to a property she held zero legal claim over. Her face was set in that familiar mask of maternal authority, completely devoid of anything resembling an apology or even mild embarrassment. "Mom?" I asked, my voice falling flat, though my heart was hammering a frantic, echoing beat against my ribs. "What are you doing here? And what happened to my front door lock?" She hushed me immediately, a sharp, dismissive hiss that cut right through the humid Carolina evening air. "Keep your voice down, Piper. The two kids just went to sleep in the guest bedroom." I leaned to the side, pressing my face closer to the wood, peering past her shoulder through the narrow gap. The sight that greeted me was a masterclass in swift, unapologetic domestic invasion. My older sister, Harper, was sprawled elegantly across my custom white linen sofa. She was wearing her street shoes. A half-empty glass of dark red wine rested precariously on the pristine armrest, the hardwood floor, which I had polished by hand just 3 days ago, was a chaotic minefield of colorful plastic blocks, abandoned dolls, and crushed cracker crumbs. Over by the entryway mirror, Harper's husband, Cole, was casually sliding his heavy denim work jacket onto my designated coat hook, as comfortable as a man who had lived there for a decade. They had not just dropped by for a visit, they had moved their entire lives inside. "Mom, unchain this door and let me in. This is my house," I said, keeping my tone deceptively even, though the adrenaline was beginning to sharpen my senses, turning my confusion into a cold, dangerous clarity. Janice did not budge an inch. Her grip on the doorframe visibly tightened. "Harper lost her rental house on Tuesday," she whispered fiercely, though her tone carried the undeniable weight of an absolute command. "The landlord sold the place out from under them without warning. Cole is between jobs right now, and they had absolutely nowhere else to go. You have 3 empty bedrooms sitting uselessly here. Piper, we did not want to bother you while you were busy on your important business trip, so we handled the situation ourselves. You handled it by breaking into my home and changing the locks on my front door." The sheer audacity was breathtaking, yet somehow entirely on brand for the Evans family dynamic. We did not break in, Janice corrected smoothly, her eyes narrowing in defense. You left a spare emergency key under the ugly ceramic frog in the garden bed. I just updated the security hardware because this neighborhood feels far too quiet for small children. Listen to me very carefully. The babies are exhausted. They cried for 4 solid hours today during the move. They finally settled down 15 minutes ago. She was deploying her favorite, most effective weapon. It was the same psychological tactic she had used against me since we were teenagers. She was actively positioning the chessboard so that any natural reaction from me, any demand for my own legal rights, would instantly brand me as the villain of the story. If I raised my voice, I was waking the innocent children. If I called the police to report a trespass, I was throwing my own toddlers out onto the cold street. If I demanded immediate entry to the home I paid for, I was the heartless, selfish, career-obsessed woman who did not care about her own flesh and blood. I looked at the scene behind her again, taking mental photographs of every detail. I saw the framed family photos Harper had already placed permanently on my living room mantel. I saw Cole's heavy boots kicked off near the expensive hallway rug. This was not a temporary emergency pit stop for a few nights. They were establishing a permanent foothold. They had successfully created a done deal. They had divided the rooms, claimed the physical spaces, and started their daily routines. They were banking heavily on the inertia of an established reality to make me surrender my territory. They assumed the sheer emotional weight of the ambush, combined with my mother's stern presence, would force me to sigh in defeat, drop my bags on the porch, and accept my new, non-consensual role as their involuntary landlord and financial safety net. They expected me to fold under the pressure. They expected me to rage, then cry, and then eventually capitulate to keep the peace. But they forgot what I do for a living. I am a corporate contract compliance manager. I spend 50 hours every single week dissecting complex, multi-layered legal agreements, identifying hidden liabilities, and constructing bulletproof exit strategies for massive corporations. I do not deal in emotional manipulation. I deal strictly in documented facts and legally binding consequences. I looked back into my mother's defiant, expectant eyes. I did not scream at her. I did not shed a single tear. I did not threaten to call the authorities right then and there. I simply let a long, heavy, suffocating silence stretch between us, watching a sudden flicker of genuine uncertainty finally cross Janice's confident face. You need to go sleep in a hotel for a few days, Janice instructed, trying desperately to regain the upper hand, though her voice wavered ever so slightly under my deadpan stare. Just until we get all the boxes sorted out and the kids get used to the new space, I will call you tomorrow afternoon. I understand, I said. My voice was so calm, so utterly devoid of inflection or anger, that it sounded almost unrecognizable to my own ears. It was the exact voice I used when a corporate vendor breached a multi-million-dollar service contract. If this is how we are doing things, then we will do it strictly by the book. I turned around smoothly, grabbed the retractable handle of my suitcase, and walked back down the wooden porch steps. I felt her eyes burning a hole into my back, searching for a sign of weakness, but I did not look over my shoulder even once. I walked straight down the concrete driveway, unlocked my car, and opened the door. I slid into the driver's seat and closed the door firmly, sealing myself in the quiet, climate-controlled confines of the vehicle. The engine remained off. I stared straight ahead at the dark windshield. Not a single tear formed in my eyes. The initial shock of the betrayal had already crystallized into a cold, diamond-hard resolve. I reached into my leather purse, pulled out my smartphone, and opened a blank digital note file. My thumbs hovered over the glowing screen for only a fraction of a second before I began to type out my new agenda. Evidence, liability, exit strategy. They wanted to play house with my life. I was going to rewrite the lease, and they were going to pay the ultimate price for breaking the rules. Sitting on the stiff, aggressively patterned bedspread of a budget highway motel room, the silence was deafening. It was a sharp contrast to the chaotic warmth they were currently enjoying at my expense. Staring at the popcorn ceiling, I let the reality of my family dynamic wash over me. It was not a sudden revelation, but rather a bitter confirmation of a truth I had known since childhood. Growing up, Harper was always the delicate bird with a broken wing, the one who constantly needed saving. If she failed a test, the teacher was too harsh. If she wrecked her car, the road was too slippery. I, on the other hand, was the designated survivor. I was the one who had to figure it out, absorb the impact, and keep moving forward. Whenever I pointed out the glaring double standard, my parents would simply shrug and call it normal. They said I was the strong one. What they really meant was that my boundaries were expendable. My mind drifted back to the house. I had poured my entire soul into those four walls. I had painstakingly curated every single inch of that space. The heavy cream-colored linen curtains hanging in the dining room were not just fabric. They were the result of 3 weekends of overtime pay. The thick Moroccan rug resting under the coffee table represented 6 straight months of eating cheap homemade meals and declining every dinner invitation from my colleagues. I had assembled that living room piece by piece, building a fortress of peace out of nothing but my own relentless discipline. Now, my sanctuary was contaminated. The image of Harper's dirty soles resting on my custom upholstery burned behind my eyelids. At Crescent Ridge Compliance Group, I manage risk and corporate governance. My days are spent dissecting convoluted agreements, hunting for liability traps, and protecting assets. If my career has taught me one absolute truth, it is this: everyone is incredibly kind and reasonable, right up until their personal interests are threatened. Human nature is predictable, and family is absolutely no exception. In fact, family can be far worse because they expertly weaponize obligation and disguise their sheer entitlement as familial love. I opened my laptop. The blue light cast long shadows against the cheap hotel wallpaper. I logged into my primary banking portal, and the numbers on the screen felt like a physical slap to the face. The scheduled monthly transfers were clearly visible: the massive mortgage deduction of $2,400, the property tax escrow, the comprehensive homeowner's insurance premium, the utility bills. Every single financial burden of that property was anchored squarely to my checking account. As I stared at the ledger, the fog of familial obligation completely evaporated. I understood the play. This situation had absolutely nothing to do with Harper needing a temporary place to crash because of a bad landlord. This was a calculated, opportunistic land grab. My mother and sister looked at my hard-won stability, my pristine credit score, and my empty guest rooms, and they collectively decided my success was a shared family asset. They wanted the luxury of my house without the crushing weight of the mortgage. I opened my encrypted cloud storage drive and pulled up the digitized closing documents from my title company. I meticulously scrolled through the warranty deed, the title insurance policy, and the mortgage agreement. I read every single line, verifying what I already knew. The legal terminology was ironclad. There were no cosigners. There were no hidden clauses. The sole legal owner of the property was Piper Evans. Next, I picked up my phone and dialed the 24-hour customer service hotline for the company that manufactured my smart lock. After a frustrating 30-minute hold, a support technician finally answered. I provided my security PIN and asked for a detailed diagnostic log of my front door device. The technician's voice was perfectly polite as she confirmed exactly what I suspected. Less than 12 hours ago, someone had physically unscrewed the interior backing of my lock, pressed the manual override button, and performed a hard factory reset. They had intentionally wiped my administrative access from the local network, effectively deleting my digital keys. They had not just changed a physical deadbolt, they had executed a deliberate technological lockout. My thumb hovered over the phone keypad. Pressing 9, then 1 would be so incredibly easy. I could have 2 uniformed officers at my front door in 10 minutes. I could have them all escorted off my property for trespassing, but I let my hand drop. I knew my mother's strategy perfectly. If I sent the police into that house tonight, Janice would immediately launch a devastating public relations campaign. By tomorrow morning, My entire extended family would be utterly convinced that I was a heartless corporate monster who traumatized two sleeping toddlers and threw her own destitute sister out onto the freezing streets. I would become the villain, and they would become the absolute martyrs. The ensuing family drama would consume my life, drain my energy, and drag me down into their chaotic mud. I closed my laptop with a soft, decisive click. I did not need the police to reclaim my territory. I had a much better weapon. I had my expertise. I decided right then and there to choose a completely different battlefield. I was going to build a beautifully formatted, legally binding trap. No rope, no drama, just paper and signatures. I'd dress it up as a generous life preserver, place it directly in their hands with a warm smile, and calmly watch as they eagerly tightened it around their own story. At exactly 8 in the morning, I stood on my own front porch holding 2 massive paper bags from the artisan bakery downtown. The scent of warm cinnamon rolls, freshly baked croissants, and premium roasted coffee drifted into the crisp morning air. I was absolutely determined not to give them a single excuse to call me cruel, unyielding, or bitter. I knocked on the heavy brass knocker with a gentle, rhythmic tap. My mother opened the door. Her defensive posture softened the moment she saw the pastry boxes. I smiled. Perfectly practiced. The kind of familial warmth I usually saved for high-stakes corporate negotiations. "I brought breakfast," I said, my voice smooth and utterly devoid of the cold fury that was currently powering my heart. We gathered around my custom walnut dining table. Cole immediately grabbed a thick glazed donut, chewing loudly while leaning back in my upholstered chair. Harper slumped beside him, looking exhausted, bouncing her youngest child on her knee. Janice poured the coffee into my expensive ceramic mugs, acting completely in her element as the benevolent matriarch holding her troubled clan together. I took a slow sip of my black coffee and let out a soft sigh, ensuring I had their complete and undivided attention. "I did a massive amount of thinking at the hotel last night," I began, adopting a tone of gentle, sisterly concern. "You were right, Mom. Harper needs a safe, stable place right now. I want to help," Janice beamed, a triumphant glow radiating from her face. She reached across the polished wood table and patted my hand. "I knew you would come to your senses, sweetie. Family is the absolute most important thing in the world. However," I continued, smoothly withdrawing my hand to reach into my leather briefcase, "there is a significant logistical issue we have to solve today. My homeowner's insurance policy is incredibly strict. Having unregistered, long-term occupants, especially a family with 2 small children, creates a massive liability risk. If one of the kids trips on the hardwood stairs or gets hurt on the property, the insurance company could deny the medical claim and completely bankrupt me. We simply cannot risk that kind of exposure." Harper stopped bouncing the baby. Her eyes narrowed defensively, sensing a trap but lacking the vocabulary to identify it. "Are you saying we cannot stay here?" "I am saying we need to formalize the arrangement so everyone sitting at this table is fully protected," I replied, sliding a neat stack of crisp white papers onto the center of the table. "I drafted a house caretaker agreement through my private asset management company, Evans Home Holdings," Harper scoffed, leaning back and crossing her arms defensively. "A contract? You seriously want to charge your own sister rent when we are completely broke and homeless?" "Absolutely not," I said, shaking my head with an expression of feigned shock. "Actually, it is the exact opposite. If you are officially classified as caretakers of the property, my insurance allows you to stay without violating the occupancy clauses. But much more importantly, it allows me to legally compensate you for your time." I let that specific word hang in the air. Compensate. I watched the sheer greed instantly override their indignation. "Compensate?" Cole asked, wiping a sugary crumb from his chin, suddenly very interested in the conversation. "Yes," I nodded smoothly, opening the folder to the second page. "The contract includes a monthly caretaking stipend of $500 to help you get back on your feet. It also includes a medical expense reimbursement fund of up to $2,000 a year. If the kids get a nasty scrape or need an emergency doctor's visit while living on the premises, the holding company covers the deductible." Janice gasped in pure delight. She turned to Harper and lightly smacked her arm. "Do you see? This is an absolute blessing. Piper is making sure you have a steady income while Cole looks for new work." Harper pulled the document closer, her suspicion entirely neutralized by the glittering promise of free cash and medical coverage. I sat perfectly still, my heartbeat steady and calm, like a seasoned predator watching its prey step willingly into an elaborate snare. "Let us just go over the basic operational rules," I murmured, keeping my voice soothing and bureaucratic. "Because you are classified as independent contractors performing essential property preservation duties. This is explicitly not a standard residential tenancy. That means if the caretaking duties cease for any reason, the license to occupy the premises terminates immediately. It just protects the limited liability company from standard housing disputes." Cole nodded vigorously, completely failing to grasp the legal guillotine I had just positioned directly over his neck. By signing that specific clause, they were eagerly waiving every single right a traditional tenant possessed. There would be no mandatory 30-day notice required, no drawn-out eviction court proceedings. The exact moment I terminated their duties, they legally became trespassers. "There are a few standard property preservation clauses to maintain the asset value," I continued, flipping to page 3 and pointing with my manicured fingernail. "A complete baseline inventory check. Absolutely no structural alterations to the house. No changing of exterior or interior hardware without written consent. And an absolute prohibition against tampering with, opening, or relocating any mail addressed to the property owner. Just standard privacy stuff." "Of course," Janice agreed quickly, eager to push the deal through before I changed my mind. "We are not going to mess with your personal mail or tear down your pristine walls. The final piece is the security compliance," I said, tapping a dense paragraph near the bottom of page 4. "To satisfy the insurance underwriters and keep the annual premiums low, I have to activate the common area surveillance system. It is just a few cameras monitoring the entryways, the garage, and the main living space to protect the physical assets from theft. It sounds a bit intense, but it is just a routine corporate requirement to prove the property is being actively monitored and secured." It sounded so incredibly normal. A mundane corporate policy. They had zero idea that this specific clause was the master key to my entire operation. It gave me documented permission to monitor common areas within the boundaries of local privacy laws. Harper shrugged dismissively. "Fine by me. I have absolutely nothing to hide from a camera. Where do I sign?" I handed her a sleek black pen. She did not bother to read the complex definitions of breach. She did not analyze the extensive liability waivers. She just focused on the bolded words regarding the cash stipend and eagerly scrawled her signature on the dotted line. Cole grabbed the pen next, signing away his legal standing with the boundless enthusiasm of a man who firmly believed he had just scammed his way into free luxury housing. Finally, my mother took the pen. She signed her name on the designated witness line, capping the pen with a sharp, deeply satisfying click. She looked at me with a victorious, condescending smile. She genuinely believed she had won the war. She thought she had successfully manipulated me into submission, forcing me to subsidize their chaotic lives using my own hard-earned resources. I smiled back at her as I carefully slid the fully executed documents into my leather briefcase. The trap was locked tight. They had just voluntarily handed me the exact legal leverage I needed to completely destroy them. I did not unpack a single piece of luggage at my own house. I drove straight back to the budget motel right off Interstate 77 and immediately set to work transforming my cramped, vaguely damp room into a sterile digital command center. I pushed the flimsy coffee maker aside and anchored my laptop in the exact center of the cheap laminate desk. On the left side of my glowing screen, I organized my digital arsenal property tax records, utility bills, and the freshly scanned, fully executed caretaker agreement. On the right side, a grid of 4 high-definition security feeds flickered to life. The living room, the kitchen, the front porch, and the hallway leading directly to my home office. Over the next 6 hours, I sat in the dim, artificial light of the motel room and watched my pristine sanctuary systematically devolve. It was like observing a time-lapse video of a localized natural disaster. My custom linen sofa was unceremoniously dragged 3 feet to the left, so Cole could have a better viewing angle for his heavy gaming console. A bright purple puddle of spilled fruit juice slowly seeped deep into the fibers of my Moroccan rug, while Harper aimlessly scrolled through her smartphone, completely ignoring the mess forming at her feet. Greasy cardboard takeout boxes began to construct a precarious, foul-smelling tower on my polished quartz kitchen island. My mother was entirely in her element, directing traffic like she held the grand deed to the estate. I watched in cold silence as she pried open my carefully labeled, moisture-sealed storage bins, shook her head in visible disapproval at my winter coats, and instructed Cole to haul my belongings out to the damp, uninsulated garage. She needed the premium hallway closet space for Harper's chaotic mountain of plastic totes. She did not send a single text message asking for my permission. In the late afternoon, the sensitive audio feed from the kitchen camera picked up Harper leaning casually against the stainless steel refrigerator. She was holding a generous pour of my expensive red wine, chatting loudly on speakerphone with a friend. "Oh, it was a total breeze," Harper laughed, her voice echoing sharply off the subway tile backsplash. "She came over this morning playing the tough corporate boss, making us sign some stupid property waiver. But she is completely soft. She would never actually have the guts to kick us out. Mom has her completely trained." I did not react to the insult. I simply hit the record button. 45 minutes later, the living room video feed showed Cole dragging a heavy aluminum step stool right into the center of the room. He held a heavy-duty cordless power drill in his right hand and a massive black metal television mounting bracket in his left. He pressed the heavy bracket aggressively against my freshly painted, flawless drywall, revved the drill, and drove a thick steel screw straight into the wooden stud. It was a direct, undeniable, fundamentally documented violation of the structural alteration clause they had eagerly signed just 8 hours prior. I felt absolutely no surge of anger. I just calmly typed the exact time and date into my digital log, saved the high-resolution video clip, and filed it securely under Breach of Contract Exhibit A. The 2 toddlers ran wildly down the hallway, screaming at the top of their lungs and dragging waxy crayons along the pristine white baseboards. I felt a brief, sharp pang of genuine sympathy for them. They were completely innocent in this entire miserable scheme. They were just young children reacting naturally to a chaotic, unstable environment created by incredibly irresponsible adults. Harper and Cole were actively using their own flesh and blood as emotional human shields. They were banking their entire squatting strategy on the absolute certainty that society, and our mother, would viciously crucify anyone who dared to evict a crying toddler. But the real turning point, the moment that shifted this from a frustrating family dispute into a dangerous legal minefield, happened just after 7 in the evening. The hallway camera caught Harper slipping quietly away from the chaotic noise of the television in the living room. She paused right at the door of my home office, glancing nervously over her shoulder to ensure no one was watching her, and slipped quietly inside. I had intentionally not placed a camera inside the office itself to avoid any murky legal gray areas regarding reasonable expectations of privacy in enclosed spaces. However, the wide-angle hallway feed gave me a perfectly clear, unobstructed view right through the open wooden door, pointing directly at my solid oak filing cabinet. I leaned closer to my laptop screen, the fan whirring loudly in the quiet motel room, my heart rate finally beginning to climb. Harper was not looking for a spare pen or a blank piece of scrap paper. She was methodically, purposefully sliding open the heavy bottom drawers where I kept my most sensitive financial documents and past tax returns. She pulled out a thick stack of mail I had left neatly sorted on the edge of the mahogany desk right before my business trip. Her eyes darted frantically toward the hallway as she rapidly shuffled through the sealed envelopes. She shoved a large handful of them deep into the oversized pockets of her knit cardigan. moving with the practiced urgency of a seasoned thief. I quickly maximized the video feed on my screen, enhancing the digital resolution and zooming in sharply on her hands just before she stuffed the very last envelope away into the fabric. The high-definition lens caught the stark, intimidating red lettering stamped aggressively across the top left corner of the thick envelope. Notice of claim, Collections Department. That was bad enough. It definitively proved Harper was actively intercepting my mail delivery to hide her own catastrophic financial disasters from the rest of the family. But it was the second envelope, the crisp white one she hesitated over for just a fraction of a second before slipping it into her pocket. That made the blood freeze solid in my veins. The camera caught the clear, bold, machine-printed letters of the addressee shining through the transparent plastic window of the envelope. It was an official piece of correspondence, but it was absolutely not addressed to Harper. It was addressed to Piper Evans. The glowing screen of my laptop cast a harsh, blue light across the cheap motel room desk. I logged directly into the secure portal of the Major Credit Reporting Bureau. My fingers moved across the keyboard with the precise, mechanical rhythm of a woman who had completely detached from her emotions. When the dashboard finally loaded, I began to peel back the layers of my family's deceit, exposing the rot underneath. My credit score was pristine, a number I had fiercely protected for my entire adult life. However, scrolling down to the recent inquiries section, a glaring, unfamiliar entry jumped off the screen. There was an active, newly opened utility account tied directly to my Social Security number. I clicked on the details, my jaw tightening. The service address listed for the electrical and water connection was not my new house, nor was it my previous apartment. It was the exact address of the dilapidated rental property Harper had supposedly just been evicted from. The account had been initiated exactly 6 weeks ago, long before their sudden housing crisis miraculously forced them onto my living room sofa. The primary account holder was registered as Piper Evans. I dug deeper into the trade lines, running a complete audit of every single transaction linked to my identity over the last 90 days. The utility bill was just the anchor. Beneath it, I found a string of recent credit checks from a popular online installment payment service. The pattern was a textbook example of identity fraud testing. First, there was a small, seemingly insignificant approval for a purchase of $45. 2 weeks later, another successful transaction appeared, this time for $120. A few days after that, the amount jumped to $600. It was a classic escalation strategy. The thief was testing the waters with minor, easily overlooked purchases to ensure the fraudulent account was active and unmonitored before attempting to drain a massive sum. A chilling memory suddenly surfaced, breaking through my analytical focus. 5 years ago, when I was transitioning between corporate jobs and moving apartments, my mother had offered to help me organize my life. She had smiled warmly and suggested she keep my old tax returns, birth certificate, and a spare copy of my Social Security card in her heavy fireproof safe. She claimed it was just for safekeeping, to ensure my vital documents were protected during the chaos of the move. At the time, it sounded like a harmless, motherly gesture. Sitting in the sterile motel room, that memory transformed into a glaring, blaring red flag. Janice held the master keys to my financial identity. I picked up my phone and dialed my homeowner's insurance broker. I needed to clarify the exact perimeter of my legal exposure. When the agent answered, I kept my voice entirely hypothetical. I asked about the specific liability risks if a designated property caretaker, rather than a formal tenant, caused significant malicious damage to the physical structure of the home. The agent carefully explained the vast difference between tenant rights and temporary guest liabilities. I meticulously wrote down every single requirement needed to prove that an occupant had zero legal residency status, heavily underlining the sections regarding criminal damage and unapproved structural alterations. Hanging up, I opened the secure video file I had saved earlier. I watched the high-definition footage of Harper rummaging through my office over and over again. I paused the video right at the exact second she shoved the thick stack of envelopes into her cardigan. The heavily stamped letters were clearly collection notices and final warnings from municipal courts, entirely bearing Harper's name. She was desperately intercepting the mail to hide the catastrophic reality of her debt from her husband and our mother. But then there was that one crisp, white envelope she had hesitated over, the envelope clearly addressed to me. She had not discarded it. She had pocketed it separately, treating it like a highly valuable piece of contraband. I refused to initiate a screaming match. Confrontation without absolute leverage was a waste of energy. Instead, I opened my email client and drafted a perfectly polite, corporately sterile message to Harper. I referenced Clause 4 of our newly signed caretaker agreement, formally requesting that she immediately place any and all mail addressed to the property owner into the secure lockbox bolted to the side door. I sent the email and watched the clock on my screen tick by. 2 hours later, my phone vibrated. It was not an email from Harper. It was a defensive, aggressive text message from my mother. Janice aggressively demanded to know why I was harassing my severely stressed sister over a few pieces of meaningless junk mail. A few minutes later, Harper finally replied to the official email. Her response was entirely evasive and dripping with manufactured outrage. She claimed she had not seen anything important, insisted she was far too busy raising her 2 children to play secretary for me, and accused me of being completely paranoid. They thought I was just being petty about paper. They had absolutely no idea that I already possessed the video evidence of the theft. I minimized the email window and immediately initiated a full, comprehensive fraud alert across all 3 major credit bureaus. With a few sharp clicks, I placed a hard freeze on my credit profile, entirely locking down my Social Security number from any future inquiries or account approvals. Then, I opened a blank legal document and began drafting a highly detailed identity theft affidavit, listing the unauthorized utility account and the escalating installment purchases. But the final twist, the revelation that completely stripped away any remaining illusion that this was just a desperate familial mistake, came when I logged into the Federal Postal Service portal. I wanted to verify the security routing of my personal mail. I stared at the confirmation screen, the blood running completely cold in my veins. An official change of address form had been fraudulently submitted and processed exactly 4 days ago. The form instructed the Postal Service to automatically reroute all of my sensitive correspondence from my secure off-site post office box directly to the street-level residential mailbox of my new house. They were not just squatting in my living room. Someone in that house had purposefully hijacked my mail delivery route to ensure they had first unobstructed access to my financial documents before I could ever see them. They were actively building a wall of fraudulent debt in my name, and they were using my own house as the shield to hide the evidence. I chose a quiet, upscale coffee shop halfway between my budget motel and my neighborhood. It was neutral territory, filled with the soft hum of espresso machines and acoustic music. I intentionally avoided inviting them to the house. I absolutely refused to turn my living room into a battlefield, and I was determined to keep this conversation far away from the innocent ears of my niece and nephew. I arrived 20 minutes early, ordered a plain black tea, and secured a secluded corner booth. At exactly 10 in the morning, my parents walked through the heavy glass doors. My father, Gordon, looked as though he had not slept in a solid week. His shoulders slumped beneath his faded flannel shirt, and his eyes actively avoided mine. My mother, Janice, however, marched in with her chin held imperiously high. She carried her oversized handbag like a physical shield. Her expression locked into a mask of defiant, misunderstood martyrdom. They slid into the booth opposite me. I did not offer pleasantries. I did not bring out any printed documents or my laptop. I simply folded my hands resting on the smooth wooden table and looked directly at them. "Thank you for meeting me," I began, keeping my voice hushed, conversational, and completely devoid of any aggressive edge. "I have 3 very straightforward questions. Who authorized the drilling of a new deadbolt into my front door? Who submitted a federal change of address form in my name? And why is my sister currently hiding official correspondence addressed to me inside her clothing?" Janice let out a loud, theatrical sigh, leaning back heavily against the leather booth and crossing her arms tight across her chest. It was her classic defensive maneuver. "Listen to yourself, Piper. You sound like a cold, heartless police interrogator. You have always been so incredibly paranoid. You always assume the absolute worst about your own flesh and blood. We are simply trying to survive a massive family crisis, and you are obsessively tracking pieces of junk mail and a single piece of brass hardware." I did not take the bait. I did not engage with the emotional gaslighting. I simply shifted my gaze away from my mother and focused entirely on my father. Gordon was staring intensely at the empty sugar packets in the center of the table. His silence was incredibly heavy. It was not the silence of confusion. It was the distinct, suffocating silence of a man who knew exactly how guilty he was, but lacked the basic courage to confess. "This is not a debate about family trust, Mom," I said, my tone remaining perfectly level, though the words were sharp. "This is a conversation about severe legal exposure. We are looking at a textbook case of identity theft. Someone is aggressively trying to hijack my financial footprint. If I am forced to involve federal investigators to clear my fraudulent credit inquiries, the authorities will not care that we share a last name. They will only look at the digital paper trail, and whoever initiated that trail is going to face felony charges." Gordon's hands began to shake slightly. He looked up, his eyes glassy and pleading. The tough exterior my mother projected was entirely absent in him. "Please, Piper," Gordon mumbled, his voice cracking with a pathetic, desperate vulnerability. "I just wanted everything to be peaceful for a little while. Harper is in a terrible spot. She is not just looking for a new rental. She is being chased aggressively by multiple debt collectors. They were threatening to garnish Cole's wages right before he lost his job. We just needed a safe harbor where they could not be easily tracked down." The puzzle pieces snapped together in my mind with a sickening, violent clarity. My stomach dropped, but my posture remained rigid. This was never a temporary rescue mission. They were not just seeking a free place to sleep. They were actively using my newly purchased house as a fortified bunker to hide from Harper's creditors. By changing my address and intercepting my mail, they were attempting to build a chaotic firewall, desperately hoping the aggressive debt collectors would get confused by the paper trail. Or worse, they were hoping the collectors would simply start attaching the family debts to my pristine, highly solvent credit profile. I looked at my parents, realizing the profound depth of their betrayal. They were willing to sacrifice my financial future to shield Harper from the consequences of her own reckless actions. "I understand," I said softly, leaning forward slightly. "So let us solve the immediate housing crisis without committing federal crimes. Here is my completely humane offer. I will personally pay for 2 adjoining rooms at the extended stay hotel on the interstate for exactly 3 nights. I will pay it up front, in cash. That gives Harper and Cole 72 hours of safe, uncomfortable shelter to contact a bankruptcy attorney and secure a new, legitimate living situation under their own names. No one is being thrown out onto the street. The children will be perfectly safe." Janice's face twisted into an ugly mask of pure, unadulterated indignation. Her eyes flashed with absolute fury. "Are you giving us conditions?" she hissed, slamming her palm flat against the wooden table, causing a nearby customer to turn and stare. "You are trying to bribe us out of your house with a cheap, filthy motel room. You have 3 massive, empty bedrooms. You are hoarding space like a greedy dragon while your own sister is suffering. You have plenty of money. Piper." Instead of arguing, Janice grabbed her smartphone from her purse, aggressively stabbed at the screen, and slammed it onto the center of the table on speakerphone. She did not even have to explain the situation. She had clearly already briefed Harper on the exact narrative. "Tell her, Harper," Janice commanded sharply. Harper's voice blasted through the small speaker, shrill, frantic, and dripping with an insane level of entitlement. "I am absolutely not moving my babies into some disgusting roadside motel. Piper, we are a family. That house belongs to the family too. Mom and Dad helped raise you, so we have just as much right to be there as you do." The sheer delusion hung in the air, heavy and toxic. They had fully convinced themselves that my individual success was a communal pool they could dip into whenever they pleased. I looked at the glowing phone screen, then at my mother's furious, expectant face, and finally at my father's defeated, cowardly posture. I did not raise my voice. I did not match their rising hysteria. I simply reached into my purse, pulled out a single $20 bill, and laid it neatly on the table to cover my tea. I stood up, smoothing the front of my tailored blazer. If you all want to sit down and talk about family ties, grace, and compassion, I am absolutely ready to have that conversation, I said, my voice dropping to a low, chilling register that cut effortlessly through the ambient noise of the cafe. But if you want to talk about property rights, who deserves what, and legal ownership, we will strictly talk with paperwork. I turned and walked toward the exit, leaving them sitting in the stunned, heavy silence of a battle they suddenly realized they could not win. By noon, my smartphone began to vibrate with a relentless, buzzing rhythm against the cheap laminate surface of the motel desk. The digital smear campaign had officially commenced. My mother, entirely predictable in her tactics of emotional warfare, had taken to her public social media page. It was a masterclass in passive-aggressive, vague posting, designed to inflict maximum reputational damage while maintaining a thin veil of plausible deniability. Her post read, "There is absolutely nothing more heartbreaking than sacrificing your entire life to raise a highly successful child, only to watch them turn their back on their own flesh and blood during a time of desperate need. Praying for my sweet grandbabies tonight. Family should always come first." She did not explicitly type my name, but the barrage of notifications from extended relatives made the intended target crystal clear. Aunt Susan commented with 3 crying emojis, adding a remark about how money tragically corrupts the soul. Cousin Mark chimed in, stating that people who abandon children are the lowest form of trash. Meanwhile, Harper was actively working the private communication channels. My phone pinged with several screenshots secretly forwarded by a sympathetic, neutral cousin. Harper had drafted a lengthy, deeply manipulative message to the extended family group chat. She expertly painted me as a wealthy, stingy corporate drone who was gleefully plotting to throw 2 innocent toddlers onto the unforgiving concrete pavement just to protect my expensive furniture. The primal urge to defend myself, to upload the high-definition security footage of the damaged drywall or the stolen financial mail, flared incredibly hot in my chest. But I am a compliance manager. I know for a fact that rolling in the mud with pigs only ensures that you both get dirty, and the pig actually enjoys it. I opened my social media application and typed a single, perfectly neutral statement. I will always support my family in finding genuine stability. But I draw a hard, non-negotiable line at deceit, emotional manipulation, and the blatant violation of my personal property and financial security. I hit post, completely muted the application, and turned my attention back to the battlefield that actually mattered. It was time to pull the first tripwire on the legal trap they had so willingly stepped into. I opened my secure email client and attached a heavily encrypted PDF document. The subject line was devoid of any sisterly affection, official notice of termination of caretaker duties. The legal language inside was sharp, clinical, and absolutely uncompromising. It clearly stated that effective immediately, their contracted services under Evans Home Holdings were officially terminated due to multiple, heavily documented breaches of the agreement. They were granted exactly 48 hours to vacate the premises entirely. If they remained inside the property past that specific deadline, they would no longer be considered family in distress. They would be legally classified as hostile, unauthorized trespassers. I hit send and waited for the shockwave. Less than 20 minutes later, my phone screen lit up. The caller ID displayed Cole's private number. I answered, letting the heavy, uncomfortable silence force him to speak first. His voice was entirely stripped of the arrogant, lazy entitlement he had paraded in my dining room just 24 hours ago. He sounded genuinely breathless and terrified. "Piper, listen, I just sat down and actually read the fine print of the paperwork we signed yesterday," he stammered. his words stumbling over each other in a desperate rush. Is it actually true? The specific part where we voluntarily waive our standard tenant rights? You can really just throw us out without a formal court order or an eviction judge. You are not a legal tenant. Cole, I replied, keeping my voice soothingly educational, like a teacher explaining a very basic concept to a slow student. You are a terminated independent contractor occupying private property. The law views you the exact same way it views a plumber who refuses to leave a house after fixing a kitchen sink. Yes, it is entirely true. You handed away your right to a prolonged court battle the second you signed for that cash stipend. A muffled scuffle echoed sharply through the receiver before Harper's shrill, frantic voice pierced my eardrum. She must have ripped the phone straight from his hands. You are completely bluffing, she screamed, all pretense of being the helpless victim vanishing into pure, cornered rage. If you even try to send someone here to remove us, I will dial 911 immediately. I will tell the police dispatcher you are a deranged lunatic, bullying your own family and actively terrorizing my children. Please do. Harper, I answered, my tone chillingly bright and welcoming. Call them immediately. I would absolutely love to have a sworn official police report to add to my growing case file. It will save my civil attorney a tremendous amount of administrative discovery work. I ended the call before she could screech another hollow threat. I spent the next 4 hours entirely immersed in tactical legal preparation. I secured an ironclad retainer with a ruthless civil litigation attorney I knew from my corporate compliance network. I securely transferred my entire digital dossier to her encrypted server. The comprehensive file included the signed caretaker agreement, the high-resolution video of the unapproved structural drilling, the footage of Harper actively stealing my mail, and the timeline of the fraudulent utility account. But I did not just send the damning, aggressive evidence. I meticulously combed through the common area camera feeds and intentionally clipped several hours of mundane, peaceful footage. I saved long videos of the children happily eating breakfast, laughing at the bright television, and playing safely with their toys on my rug. I uploaded these specific clips to a secondary folder labeled Proof of Child Welfare. I knew my mother's ultimate trump card would be to accuse me of severe child endangerment to win in the court of public opinion. I was preemptively destroying that toxic narrative. If Child Protective Services ever knocked on my door, I had indisputable, time-stamped proof that the only real danger those kids faced was the sheer, breathtaking incompetence of their own parents. The sun was beginning to set, casting long orange shadows across the cracked asphalt of the motel parking lot, when a new notification popped up from a hidden message request folder on my social media account. It was from a woman named Sarah, an old college roommate of Harper's, whom I had not spoken to in nearly 7 years. I clicked the message open, my eyes scanning the text as the final, sickening twist of the knife settled deep into my gut. Piper, I saw your vague post today. I know we do not talk anymore, but I felt like I had a moral obligation to warn you. Please lock down your credit profile immediately. 4 years ago, when Harper and I lived together, she completely maxed out 3 massive credit cards, but the accounts were not in her name. She had secretly memorized her own grandmother's social security number and used it to open the fraudulent lines of credit. Your parents found out and completely covered it up, paying off the debt quietly to keep Harper out of federal prison. If she is crashing at your place right now, you are absolutely her next financial target. I stared at the glowing screen, the final piece of the ugly, twisted puzzle locking firmly into place. This was not a desperate, one-time mistake driven by sudden poverty. This was a practiced, predatory methodology, and my parents had known exactly what she was capable of the entire time. The digital scan from the postal inspector arrived in my inbox just before noon. It was a high-resolution file of the physical change of address form, submitted exactly 4 days prior. I zoomed in on the signature line at the bottom of the page. The name was mine, but the handwriting was a clumsy, desperate forgery. The sharp, aggressive angles of the capital letters and the trailing loops were entirely wrong. It looked exactly like someone had tried to trace an old document from memory. I opened my secure video archive. pulling up the hallway camera footage from yesterday afternoon. I scrolled back past the moment Harper had stuffed the collection notices into her cardigan. I focused on a 30-second window I had previously flagged as suspicious. There it was, right before she grabbed the physical mail. Harper had been hovering over my open filing cabinet, her smartphone raised high. The screen glare illuminated her face as she snapped rapid-fire photographs of my old tax documents and bank statements. She had not just stolen the incoming letters. She had actively digitized my entire financial history to build her fraudulent profiles. The puzzle pieces locked together with absolute, terrifying precision. I did not waste a single second on anger. I opened 3 new browser tabs and went straight to work. First, I submitted a comprehensive identity theft report through the Federal Trade Commission portal, generating an official, legally binding affidavit. Next, I initiated formal disputes with all major credit bureaus, attaching the affidavit to completely obliterate the fraudulent utility account and the escalating installment loans from my record. I demanded a full fraud investigation into the utility provider for failing to verify the applicant's identity, with my financial perimeter finally secured. I turned my attention to the physical enablers. I drafted a formal letter of demand addressed directly to Janice and Gordon Evans. I did not use the words mother or father anywhere in the text. The document explicitly prohibited them from stepping foot onto my property, approaching my driveway, or interfering with any mail addressed to me. The final paragraph contained a strict no-contact directive, mandating that all future communications regarding their daughter or my property be routed exclusively through my retained civil attorney. I paid a premium fee to have a local courier hand-deliver the notice to their front door. The fallout was almost instantaneous, but I did not engage until much later that evening. At exactly 11 o'clock at night, my phone illuminated the dark motel room. It was Gordon. I answered on the 3rd ring, putting the device on speakerphone. "Piper," he whispered, his voice cracking violently, completely stripped of any patriarchal authority. He sounded like a broken, exhausted man. "I just read this terrifying letter from your lawyer. Are you really going to do this? Are you actually going to drag your own sister into a courtroom?" I stared at the blinking cursor on my laptop screen. "I am not taking anyone to court. Gordon, the person who forged federal postal documents and committed wire fraud, took themselves there. I am simply refusing to be the collateral damage." He let out a shaky, pathetic breath, entirely unable to formulate a defense, and the line went dead. Harper, however, was not ready to surrender gracefully. The next morning, my attorney forwarded me a frantic, poorly formatted email from a cheap legal aid clinic. Harper was attempting to play her final, desperate card. She was threatening to file a countersuit for severe emotional distress and illegal eviction practices, claiming my internal surveillance cameras were causing her extreme psychological trauma. My attorney had already replied. The response was a masterpiece of legal dismissal, completely ignoring Harper's emotional hysteria and citing exactly 4 specific clauses of the caretaker agreement she had willingly signed. It calmly reiterated the fast-approaching eviction deadline and promised swift police intervention if the property was not vacated on time. The harsh reality of the situation finally breached the walls of my stolen house. I pulled up the living room camera feed just in time to watch their toxic alliance fracture. Cole was frantically shoving folded shirts and heavy work pants into a large canvas duffel bag. He was moving with the chaotic, wide-eyed energy of a rat fleeing a sinking ship. He had clearly realized that staying past the deadline meant catching a criminal trespassing charge, and his self-preservation instincts had finally overridden his desire for free rent. Harper stood in the center of the living room, her face contorted in absolute fury. She screamed at him, waving her arms wildly, calling him a pathetic coward for abandoning his family. Cole did not even look up. He just zipped the bag shut, grabbed his heavy boots, and marched straight out the front door without saying a single word to her or the children playing on the rug. I sat back in my chair, watching the inevitable, messy collapse of their hostile takeover. The victory felt hollow, but necessary. The 48-hour deadline was less than 2 hours away. Then, A sharp ping echoed from my laptop's speakers. A high-priority email notification slid across the top right corner of my screen. It was an automated security alert from the manufacturer of my front door smart lock. I clicked the subject line, my eyes scanning the bold red text. It was a mandatory verification request. Someone currently inside the house, utilizing the local wireless network, was actively attempting to initiate a hard transfer of the device's administrative ownership rights. They were trying to completely lock me out of the digital system and claim permanent digital residency just minutes before the eviction deadline expired. Someone in that house was preparing to barricade the doors. I arranged the final summit far away from the contaminated war zone of my own property. I instructed my civil attorney, Evelyn, to reserve her most imposing conference room. I wanted no screaming toddlers echoing down the hallway, no nosy neighbors watching from their porches, and absolutely no home field advantage for my family. The room was a masterclass in corporate intimidation, featuring floor-to-ceiling glass walls, a massive mahogany table, and the chilling, sterile hum of high-end central air conditioning. Promptly at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they arrived. Janice and Gordon flanked Harper like a pair of delusional, exhausted bodyguards. Harper looked visibly disheveled, her trademark arrogant facade cracking slightly under the unforgiving fluorescent lights. Yet, her chin remained tilted upward in an absurd, desperate display of defiance. Evelyn sat silently beside me, her posture impeccably straight, her manicured hands resting lightly over a thick, unmarked manila folder. I did not offer them bottled water. I did not engage in polite, introductory small talk. I simply pushed a single, crisp sheet of paper across the polished expanse of the table. "This is your one and only graceful exit," I stated, keeping my voice incredibly even and devoid of any familial warmth. "You have exactly 18 hours remaining on the formal termination notice. If you pack every single piece of your belongings and vacate the premises completely by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, I will not pursue a public spectacle. I will not post the internal security footage online to counter the ridiculous social media smear campaign you started, and we will handle the immediate property surrender with the absolute minimum amount of legal friction." Janice immediately leaned forward, her eyes brimming with those perfectly manufactured, tragic tears she had utilized my entire life. She looked at me not like a daughter, but like a monster she had somehow accidentally created. Is this really what it has come to? Piper, sitting in a cold, sterile corporate office threatening your own blood, throwing your sister out like trash, just how badly do you need to win this sick, imaginary competition against your own family? I met her weeping gaze without blinking. The guilt trip that would have crushed me 10 years ago barely registered as a minor annoyance today. "I do not want to win anything, Mom," I replied smoothly. "I simply want to stop being used as a human shield and an automatic teller machine." Harper scoffed loudly, a harsh, grating sound that bounced aggressively off the glass walls. She crossed her arms, sinking deeper into the plush leather chair. "You are completely out of your mind if you think a single piece of paper scares me. I have established a physical footprint. My children sleep in those bedrooms. I have a legal, fundamental right to be there. And no judge in this entire state is going to throw a struggling mother out onto the street just because you threw a massive tantrum. Just try and evict me. Piper, I will drag this out in the housing court system for a solid year." Evelyn finally moved. She leaned forward, sliding the heavily highlighted caretaker agreement directly into the center of the table. Her voice was the verbal equivalent of a freezing, surgical scalpel. "You are fundamentally misunderstanding your legal standing here, ma'am," Evelyn explained, her tone dripping with professional condescension. "You do not possess a standard residential lease. You hold a highly specific, revocable license to occupy the premises, strictly tied to ongoing property preservation duties. Those specific duties were legally terminated yesterday afternoon, as of tomorrow morning. You are not a tenant facing a prolonged eviction process. You are an unauthorized trespasser subject to immediate law enforcement removal." Harper opened her mouth to scream an objection, but I cut her off by reaching over and opening Evelyn's manila folder. I placed the first piece of evidence face up on the dark wood. It was the high-definition, glossy photograph extracted from the hallway camera, showing Harper actively shoving my official mail into her oversized cardigan. Next to it, I laid the printed digital scan of the forged postal change of address form. Finally, I placed the heavily redacted confirmation document of the new utility account opened in my exact name at her former, dilapidated address. "This is not a debate about housing rights anymore," I said, tapping the forged signature with my index finger. I watched the color completely drain from Harper's face. For one singular, terrifying second, the massive, crushing reality of federal wire fraud and severe identity theft punctured her thick bubble of absolute entitlement. She stared at the forged handwriting, her jaw dropping slightly, but her narcissism was far too deeply ingrained to allow for a genuine confession. She blinked rapidly, her temporary panic instantly hardening back into a thick, defensive wall of denial. "This is completely fabricated garbage," Harper stammered, her voice suddenly pitching an entire octave higher as she pointed a trembling finger at the documents. "Someone else must have set me up. Anyone could have filled out that online postal form or opened that electric account. You cannot prove I did any of this." Gordon, however, could not compartmentalize the terrifying truth sitting right in front of him. He stared at the undeniable documents, his face turning a sickly, ashen shade of gray. He looked at the fraudulent utility bill, then at his oldest daughter's panicked face, and finally up at me. The willful, cowardly ignorance he had clung to for decades, completely shattered in that exact moment. He suddenly realized this was no longer a petty domestic squabble over a spare bedroom or a simple family misunderstanding. This was a massive, undeniable mountain of felony evidence sitting under the harsh lights of a lawyer's office. The risk of devastating criminal and civil prosecution was no longer a vague, easily dismissed threat. It was a fully loaded weapon pointed directly at his favorite child's head. He gripped the edge of the mahogany table, his knuckles turning completely white. I stood up slowly, calmly buttoning the center button of my tailored blazer. The negotiation was officially over. I looked down at the three of them, a family I no longer recognized and no longer felt any agonizing obligation to protect. "Tomorrow," I said, my voice dropping to a freezing, absolute calm that commanded the entire room. "You all can choose to leave the property in total, respectful silence, or you can choose to leave when the absolute truth arrives at the front door accompanied by a uniformed process server. The choice is entirely yours." Exactly at 8 in the morning, the crisp North Carolina air felt incredibly sharp and refreshing against my face. I pulled my car into my own driveway, but I was not alone. My civil attorney, Evelyn, parked her sleek silver sedan right behind me. Directly behind her was a marked county sheriff cruiser. I had arranged for a formal civil standby. There would be absolutely no screaming matches on the front lawn, no physical tug of war over my front door, and most importantly, no chaotic environment that would turn my young niece and nephew into collateral damage in a theatrical war zone. Harper threw the front door open before I even reached the porch steps. She had clearly prepared for a massive, dramatic performance. She was clutching her youngest child tightly to her chest, her face perfectly composed into a mask of pure, victimized terror. She took a deep breath, preparing to scream to the entire neighborhood about how evil and heartless I was for throwing babies out onto the freezing street. Her mouth opened, but the words died instantly in her throat. A man in a plain beige suit, whom I had hired specifically for this exact moment, stepped swiftly past the two uniformed police officers. He looked directly at my sister. "Harper Evans?" he asked, his voice entirely neutral. Harper blinked, her false bravado faltering for a fraction of a second. "Yes." The man immediately thrust a thick, heavy stack of legally bound papers directly against her chest, forcing her to grab them with her free hands so they would not fall. "You have been formally served." Harper stared down at the documents. The bold black ink on the top page detailed the massive collections lawsuit from her previous creditors, combined with a preliminary civil injunction regarding the identity fraud and unauthorized utility accounts opened under my name. In a single, devastating second, every ounce of her arrogant, entitled posture completely evaporated. She was not a fierce mother fighting for her family anymore. She was a cornered criminal holding a mountain of undeniable legal consequences. Behind her, the hallway erupted into chaotic movement. Cole had seen the flashing lights of the cruiser and the massive stack of legal papers. Without uttering a single word of defense or comfort to his wife, he hoisted his heavy canvas duffel bag over his shoulder, squeezed past the police officers on the porch, and practically sprinted toward his battered pickup truck. He was severing his ties immediately to save himself from the impending legal fallout. My mother, Janice, stood frozen in the entryway, her mouth hanging open in absolute shock. The human chess pieces she had spent her entire life manipulating were suddenly abandoning the board. Then came the final, sickening revelation. Gordon stepped out onto the porch, his face pale and slick with nervous sweat. He looked at the legal summons in Harper's hand, then looked at me, his eyes brimming with pathetic, cowardly tears. "I am so sorry, Piper," my father whispered, his voice shaking violently. "I just gave her a photocopy of your old tax document. I swear to you, I thought she just needed a clean address to redirect the collection agencies for a few weeks to buy some time. I had absolutely no idea she was going to use your social security number to open a new electrical account. I just wanted to help her stall them." He had handed her the very weapon she used to steal my identity. Utterly convinced that his reckless enablement was an act of parental love, I did not yell. I did not cry. I simply pulled my digital tablet from my briefcase and handed it to Evelyn. My attorney held the screen up for my parents and my sister to see clearly. On the screen, a crystal clear video played. It showed Harper frantically rummaging through my office drawers and stuffing my mail into her sweater. The screen swiped to a second video, time-stamped at 10 o'clock the previous night, showing Harper aggressively punching codes into the smart lock panel, desperately attempting to hijack the administrative rights to barricade the house before the eviction deadline. "You tried to lock me out of my own property while actively building a fraudulent life in my name," I said, my voice dropping to a freezing, absolute calm. I reached into my briefcase one last time and pulled out a simple, white folder. I handed it to my mother. I was still committed to the absolute minimum standard of human decency. Inside this folder is a comprehensive list of affordable extended stay motels, local emergency family housing contacts, and the phone number of a reputable debt consolidation charity, I instructed them, my tone strictly corporate. "You have exactly 2 hours to pack your clothing, your personal items, and the children's toys. The officers will wait right here to ensure the physical property is not damaged during your departure. No one is putting the children on the street, but you are leaving my property today." By 11 in the morning, the driveway was completely empty. The heavy silence of the house finally returned to me. I immediately called a professional locksmith, who drilled out the unauthorized brass deadbolt and installed a high-security biometric system. I wiped the digital network entirely clean, revoking every single digital footprint they had left behind. Evelyn finalized the formal no trespass orders, guaranteeing that if any of them stepped onto my grass again, they would be arrested on the spot. I then scheduled a professional deep cleaning crew and a contractor to inspect the drywall damage, before leaving the house to go back to my hotel for one final night while the cleaning crew worked. I walked into my home office. I knelt down and pulled open the bottom drawer of my heavy oak filing cabinet, the exact spot where Harper had frantically searched. Tucked entirely in the back was a heavily crumpled, torn manila envelope. Harper had desperately clawed it open, completely convinced she had found the holy grail of my financial existence, but the envelope she found was entirely empty. The vital documents she was so desperately hunting for, my original birth certificate, my physical social security card, and my genuine property deed, were never kept inside this house. I had locked them securely inside a reinforced safety deposit box at a downtown bank vault exactly 4 months ago. she had risked federal wire fraud charges for absolute garbage. I sat alone on my white linen sofa, looking out the large bay window at the quiet neighborhood street. I did not feel the triumphant, fiery rush of a dramatic revenge plot. I felt something much better. I felt profound peace. I realized that the ultimate punishment for toxic, manipulative people is not a screaming confrontation or a dramatic fight. The most devastating consequence you can ever inflict upon them is simply setting an unbreakable boundary, completely removing their access to your life, and locking the door behind them forever. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please let me know where you are listening from in the comments below so we can interact and share our thoughts. I invite you to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and support me even more by pressing the like button so this story can be heard by many more people.